And I'm wondering how men respond to family or couples counseling. Yeah, I'm wondering how they respond to family or couples counseling.
Well, your point is well taken. I think that probably, and this is a guess, but I would guess 70% of clients are women.
Okay.
And that's reflective of what you're saying, is that counseling of any sort, really, there are less men, fewer men involved than women. And then there's this notion that's present perhaps a bit more in our community than some other communities. And I certainly grew up with that value. You keep your business to yourself.
Mm.
Right? And so there's a lot of pushback in that way, that I don't need somebody who doesn't know us to tell us what to do with our relationship.
Mhm.
So that's one of the biggest barriers, those two things, that you don't put your business in the street and
Mhm.
that we don't need a stranger telling us how to make this relationship work.
Exactly. But for a marriage to be, we need marriages, of course, in our communities, and so in some way we have to be accountable to the community that we're a part of. But that doesn't necessarily mean to, have your house door wide open. But there still is some role that the community does play in supporting marriages.
Yeah, and I say couples often because the fact of the matter is that there are people who are in trouble and people who come for help and they're not technically married,
Technically.
right?
Uh-huh.
But they're in a committed relationship, and
Mhm.
so that's then the focus is a committed relationship.
Committed relationship. Okay.
And I try to determine that from the beginning is why are you here? I mean, that's really the first question. Why are you here? And then what got you here? So those two questions begin to tell me a lot because sometimes what happens, unfortunately, is one party is coming to counseling with the other party in order to deliver the bad news. I'm done with this relationship.
Wow.
Yeah, right. Happens more than you might think, right? And so the safety of the counseling room is a place to be able to do that.
It's like you're a mediator then.
Exactly.
Okay.
And so this other person then is
Ouch.
there and hearing that, no, I don't think there's a future for us. So yeah, that does happen.
Mm.
Mhm. Okay.
Does it happen ever that men initiate the counseling experience, or is it typically that they don't?
It's typical that they don't, but I have had occasions where it has happened. And often when that happens, it's because the wife has fairly serious other emotional or mental health issues,
Okay. It has to be
right?
something severe.
Severe, so that, I mean, take for example a severe substance abuse problem, right? And so it doesn't come necessarily as relationship focused. It still fix her, but he's making an effort to get her in
Mhm.
for some help. Yeah.
Okay. Is it true that it's almost an adage now that 50% of marriages end in divorce? Is that accurate, or is that just something that we kind of ran with?
It's an interesting thing. It's a very interesting question. And I don't have the facts, the exact figures in front of me. The 50% number runs across the range of people from just getting married to people who've been married for 40 years, right?
Okay.
Now, once you begin to break that down into other segments, so if you look at people who've been married from 1 to 10 years, that rate may be going to be different than the rate of divorce between people who've been married for 10 to 20 years.
Ah.
You see what I'm saying? So
Okay.
it really depends on how long you've been married as to what percentage of people are getting divorced.
Okay, we have to really be careful with those
Ooh, you
numbers.
have to be
Anytime
careful
something ends
Yeah.
because
with a 0 or a 5,
Yeah.
that's kind of iffy.
Yeah.
Like half,
Yeah, right.
most.
Yeah, right.
it's like
Yeah.
you create an assumption that you're talking about this one group, and you're
Yeah.
actually talking about specific groups and age groups.
Yeah.
People
Exactly.
who've devoted time for maybe 10, 20, 30 years are going to be different from someone that's 5 or 10. That's
Right.
huge.
That
That's huge,
reminds me
isn't
of
it?
this. There was this really crazy statistic about black women
Mm.
and their rates of, I think, their marriage rates. I think it was something like, but it prompted all of this media attention about, oh, why can't black women find a man? And, it was on NBC,
Yeah.
like, oh, we're in just
The
so
nightly
much
news.
trouble.
Yeah.
And then it turned out, well, there's a certain demographic of women who are not married, but that includes very young women who have no intention of getting married.
Yes.
It doesn't take into account women who have been married, and just for some reason chose not to be married anymore. It doesn't take those things into account. So, we're in this panic mode, like, oh no, better find a man, cling to something.
Yeah, and that's what the news intends to do, is to,
Yeah.
get a big reaction, but
Yeah.
it's not necessarily factual.
Right.
So yeah, that number changes a lot depending on which demographic you're a part of.
That's pretty interesting. I want to take the opportunity now to open up the phone lines. Please give us a call if you have any questions for Dr. Everette or comments for the show period. And you can call area code 313-868-0342, 313-868-0351, and 313-868-4336. I have not memorized those. I should. I heard once that, what is it? That criticism is a bad way of making a request.
Oh boy.
What does that mean?
We learn very bad habits, is what that means.
Okay.
You know, the doctors Gottman, they are sort of the leaders in, because they've done longitudinal studies. They've looked at couples for the last 30 years or so, and so they have a lot of data that's been gathered over a long period of time, unlike most other people. And so they say that they can predict from one interview which couples will stay married and which couples will divorce.
Oh, that's mind-blowing.
It is for the, and they're with a 90-point-something degree accuracy. Now, here's the thing.
Wow.
They're looking to see these four things. How much
Wait,
they...
let me just skip. Hold on.
These are golden
Okay.
nuggets. Gotta write them down.
All right, go ahead.
Right, say, what did they say now?
Number one.
Criticism.
Mm.
So, when we are critical of our partner, meaning attacking, making any statement that when we want to say this is wrong, we make it about them. Okay.
You're wrong.
You're wrong. It's not that we have a problem, that something's not going right here, let's figure it out, but that the problem is you. When that happens, those couples are much more likely to get a divorce. It comes up like you're always. You know how
Yeah.
we can be prone to those statements.
Always,
Yeah,
never.
You're always. Right.
Never do this.
You never do that. Right?
Okay.
The other thing is defensiveness. And if you think about it, defensiveness is related to criticism. If somebody comes at you with "you never do," it's very likely that you're going to respond by reminding them those
You're
times
preparing
when you
all the
did,
time to
right?
fight back.
Exactly. I mean, it's human nature.
Yes.
So
Okay.
we want to be careful of being critical. We want to be careful of being so defensive that we cannot hear the message that's being brought to us. Sometimes the way the message is being delivered is poor, but there's value to hearing what's in that message, right? Contempt. Now, contempt is probably the most harsh of these four character traits or ways of being. So that's when we just no longer display any good feelings toward that other. You know, we hold them in contempt. And this usually comes after a series and a long list of problems that have gone unresolved, and we have a sack full of resentments that have not been aired and have not been resolved, and it can lead to contempt. And then there's this thing called stonewalling. And stonewalling is when you just won't show up. So somebody comes to you, your significant other, and says, I'm really concerned about how much time we spend together. We don't spend nearly enough time together. And you just don't engage. You won't talk. You just take emotional leave. You may be present but absent.
Okay.
Right? So you don't want to hear it. You withdraw. You deny it. That's stonewalling. So if you put all four of those things together, I think you can see clearly why that would spell the doom of a relationship, right?
Right, there's nowhere to go.
There's nowhere to go. Everything's been shut down and off.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of
Okay.
shut down and off, 2 years before my mother passed, she shared something with me that I had known all of my life. My father died when I was 5, he was 34. And 2 weeks before she passed, she says, you know, your father was an abuser. He abused me in public, he abused me in public, he abused me with the family, and everybody knew about it. So now your thoughts go, wow, this is huge. She finally released it. She's been carrying this all these years. And so my question in bringing that up is, how often is domestic violence, whether it be isolation, emotional or physical, prevalent? Or can you sometimes identify it even if it's not spoken?
Well, I don't have the figures on domestic violence, but I do recall attending a workshop several years ago, and they did this demonstration just to show how frequent domestic violence is, and so they started pouring pennies, a large jar of pennies, into a glass. So of course it made noise,
Right.
and every penny that hit, they said somewhere in the world the woman was being abused.
Wow.
So, and that's not to say that only women are abused. In fact, I had a situation last week where a young man was being abused. So
Okay.
it does happen, but certainly by far, in terms of physical abuse, it tends to be male directed to female. When we talk about other kinds of abuse, then the numbers begin to even off a little more. Verbal abuse, um, withdrawing oneself, I guess one, maybe a stretch to call that
Emotional.
abuse, but certainly emotional withholding,
Right.
you know.
Right.
Okay. Okay, now, so do you, in your experience, have you seen people come in for counseling who are dealing with physical abuse?
You know, that's interesting. When you were saying that, Mr. Cheeks, I ran through my mind. I don't see a lot of people coming in with that as an issue.
Okay.
No. And there are particular protocols that are in place for people who are in domestic violence situations. There are specific agencies that are set up to help women. There are shelters that exist to help people. So, yeah. So I
Okay.
don't.
So
I
you
don't
don't
see,
engage
I
in
don't,
counseling the
I
same
don't
way?
see a lot of it.
Okay.
No. No.
And if you did, it would not be the same protocol?
If I did, it would not be the same protocol at all, because the
Okay.
first thing you do in situations like that is to ensure the safety of the person being
right, that's
abused.
right.
Exactly.
right.
Exactly. And we have a call.
Hello, how you
Greetings.
doing?
Wonderful. Do you have a question or comment for our guest?
Yes, I think that we are lost for communication.
You said
And I
you're
was texting my friends, and me and her was getting kind of close. And it seemed like to me every time I text her, she don't text me back. And I'm saying, wow. I mean, I know women can be very emotional. I know that, but at the same time, I just try to go along. I just bear with it, and I just accept it what she don't do. But I do text her and tell her, hey, I love her, and I said we need to do things together and stuff like that. But I know that she got kids and stuff that she got to deal with, like older kids that's staying with her, and I know that she's going through some type of changes too.
okay. So you communicate primarily through text message, or do you talk on the phone? Do you see each other?
Nah, we see each other every once in a while because she got kids and stuff, and she got grandkids, she got a lot going on in her life, and I'm trying to, bear with her. And I just deal with it, but other than that, I don't try to, go overboard with it. I just let it be.
Okay, so you want to stick with the sister. So if I want to make sure that we understood what your question was. Did you understand?
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you want to know. I'm sorry. So you want to know why you're not getting a response from the young lady?
Yeah, because yes, I really want to know.
Okay, so yeah, in these modern relationships, we have these different methods of communicating, and we try
One.
to get this
Texting.
one method of communicating, and it's hard when it's only verbal. So, it's hard to pick up on any of the other cues.
Absolutely.
Okay, so what kind of messages do you exchange? Okay.
I exchange her message. I just tell her, I love her. I give her Bible scriptures and stuff like that. And I let her know what's going on with my life. I just give her Bible scripture, and let her know I love her and everything. I care about her, and everything of that nature. But I just take care of my daughters and my grandkids at my end. I know she got a lot going on her end, so I kind of look at it like that.
Okay.
Is there a question? Because it seems to me like you've described circumstances where you're both very busy, working with your kids, and your communication has been diminished to text messaging. Is that is that
Basically,
is that pretty accurate?
basically.
So
Okay.
what is your question?
My question is, I was just wondering why why she's not texting back, and I'm texting her. I ain't that busy, but I cannot text her. It ain't that busy, but she can't text me.
Have you asked her why?
Yeah, I asked her why, but she don't text me back.
Okay, so she's never answered the question, why aren't you more in communication with me? Never.
Right.
Well, do you think she's sending you a message?
She send me a message every once in a while. If it's on my birthday, she send me a message every once in a while.
No, I'm sorry. I'm wondering if there's a message in how she's behaving. What are you making of it? What do you think is going on?
Yeah, I can't put my fingers on it, but when I go to her house, I'll sit with her for a minute, and it's like it's okay, but I don't like to stay too long because she do got older kids, and she been with her kids for it's always been her and her kids. Her kids like in their late 20s and in their early 20s.
So it seems like she may be telling you something by not returning your communications.
Right, because she's dealing with older kids.
Okay. Well, so you would suggest to him that he reach out to her and just find out why, or
Yeah, you'll never know for
Yeah,
sure until she tells you. That's the thing.
she's it's something else. I can tell you that.
okay. Well, you know what? We would really love for you to come out to a wellness conference for men and women on October 11th to speak more and, maybe talk more about how we deal with these relationship issues. So that's going to be coming up on October 11th. That's a Sunday. So please keep in touch with us on the Facebook page, and that is Wellness Advocates of Detroit. You can also get in contact directly with Dr. Pauline Everette through her website. Can you give us the website, please?
I'm going to give you a phone number,
Okay.
rather. That's probably best, and that's 313-567-3573. So if you would like to, come in and talk a little more about that, or if she's willing to come in with you, I'd be happy to sit down with the both of you and maybe we could come to a better understanding of what's actually going on.
The texting back and forth when I was coming up, we never had those cell phones and stuff. We'll talk, we'll come over each other's house, we'll meet each other's parents and stuff like that. But the days were to change tremendously.
Okay, something has changed.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, well, thank you so much for calling in to speak with us. And please, again, find us on Facebook. And we also have the number, that's 313-567-3573 for Dr. Pauline and Associates. And thank you so much for your call. Okay. So sorry. No, I was wondering, are there any counters? Is there a way to counter some of these things that we need to avoid, the criticism, defensiveness, contempt, and
Yes.
stonewalling?
Yes, that's an excellent question.
Please.
You know, often when people come in, they'll say, we don't communicate. And so then we have to start to break that down because they are communicating. It's almost like the last caller was saying, he's saying we're not communicating, but in a sense they are communicating.
Yeah, it's pretty clear to,
It's
to
pretty-
people that are observers.
Yes, right. So it's
Yeah.
it's like she's communicating that she doesn't have a lot of time to devote to him right now. Now we don't know why, but we know that that's what she's communicating through her behavior. So we kind of start off by looking at breaking that concept of communication down and looking at, well, the things we talked about. Do you know your partner? It's really to stop and
wondering that.
entertain that question. How well do I know my partner?
Okay.
Right? Do I know? And I don't mean things like his favorite color or favorite meal, but do you know what makes them excited? Do you know what lights up their world? Do you know what they think their purpose for being here is?
Right, right.
You know what I'm saying? So getting to know that person really intimately is a great way to rekindle if the embers have started to die
Right.
down a little bit, but to really reconnect. Because sometimes at the beginning of a relationship and all the intensity and all the hormones that are going on in that stage of the relationship, then we move into, depending on the age in which we're talking, but maybe the childbearing age and all of that, and we get busy with work and rearing children and all that, and we get out of touch. And then by the time we know it, we don't really know that person very well anymore. So I think reconnecting, getting back in touch with each other, is an excellent starting point.
And I wonder how challenging, what an extra challenge that is when you are communicating primarily via text message. How does that work? It
Not
reminds
very
me of
well.
sort of like a long distance relationship or maybe something like that.
Not very well.
It almost sounds like the definition of a problem.
Yes.
If we're
Okay.
communicating
Yes.
by text and text alone, there is a problem. Maybe I'm in it and I don't recognize it or want to recognize it, but it's pretty clear that we are not doing what I would like to have happen.
Okay. Right. You can't be particularly engaged.
You can't be.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing about that is that while that seems to have become the preferred means of communication, people in romance of both genders will complain about it. But it's almost like getting caught up in something and not knowing how to stop it.
Yeah. How to stop it,
How to stop it.
how to
Yeah,
use
this
it
crazy
in a way
thing.
that doesn't interfere with the energy of the
Yes.
relationship.
Okay.
Yes.
So have any researchers figured that out yet?
I think they're still looking at it. I think the jury is still out. The whole dating scene now with many of the apps that are on phones and different ways that
That's right.
people are communicating. And I've talked to some people in the, say, 25, 35-year-old range, and what seems to be going on there is they meet online, they talk online, and they don't see each other until they have the first date, and that's arranged online. So, I am concerned about what this may be doing to intimacy, and I don't mean sexual intimacy, but I mean intimacy that exists between human beings.
beings.
Right.
Because they know each other, they feel each other, they're
Right.
in each other's
Right.
space.
And if that's your foundation, how can there be any expectation of any real intimacy?
Yes.
Wow, that scares me. I see we have another call. Greetings. Thank you for calling the Think Tank Show. Do you have a question for our guest? Apparently not. Okay, so sorry.
I
So-
wondered if I could ask the doctor another question.
Please.
As we were talking about couples, male and female, I'm always wondering how often the children are brought up and are pitted between one or the other in the couple. Or the children are sometimes so much of a part of the conversation that the two people forget about themselves. I'm just wondering how much children suffer. You know, for example, there are over 5,000 children in foster care, and many of them are African American or Hispanic, and that means that this group of people represented in our country are having a difficult time staying together and leaving children homeless. And I'm wondering, when you, in your practice, can you point at some of the things that are pretty common among those 4 key issues that you just talked about recently that probably drive couples apart instead of bringing them together?
That's an excellent question. I think that we're living in times where we're all very busy, and it's not that human beings have ever necessarily lived in times when they weren't busy, because certainly farmers were very busy,
Right.
but they were busy together
And during a certain time.
and during a certain time. So they were busy farming the land, and everybody was helping with that. There were then dinner, and they had dinner together, and they had church, and they had church together, or whatever, wherever they did their religious worship. Nowadays, that's a little different, so that we're all on these separate tracks. And
We
you know,
have individual lives.
individual lives. The
Yeah.
children all have televisions and cell phones in their room, and the parents have their recreation in their room.
It's like it's a setup.
It's a setup for failure in
Yeah.
many ways. So there's very little engagement.
And that's normal.
That's more normal than we'd like to see, for certain. You know, so part of what we do is we begin to introduce the idea of maybe having one meal together a week. One.
Baby
Right.
steps.
Baby steps.